Hi, Zoom people. Can you hear me? Okay, very good. Where are we? Basically in the material. So we should not use this part of the whiteboard. So we finished quad 3, R3, and KD3. There are various range trees that are waiting for us. So sometimes we'll get back to them. And we want to start motion planning today, but before that I thought that I'll give a very brief overview of what the type of trees that we were playing, what is unique to each one of them. So quad tree can take as an input any type of data, triangles, points, images, other shapes. They might intersect, they might not intersect, we don't care, and always split into 4 equal sites. If it splits at all, we played with different splitting policies about how to decide if I need to split or not. If we had points, then the splitting policy was we want that every leaf will contain only few points. We decide what is few, but in the slides it was always 1. And if we split, always split into 4 quadrants. And quad trees, what made it unique compared to the other trees was that it led to good triangulation. Good meshes, triangulated meshes. Right. The moment that I realized that my input is a complicated shape, doesn't need to be connected, but might be. And I had some splitting policy, like I want to make it completely confirmed or follow the shape of the boundary. That is, I'll keep splitting until what I get as a quadrant. It was not a great shape to use as an example. I'll get that the boundaries of the shape are well enough approximated by boundaries of quadrants of the quad tree itself. I can decide to triangulate the whole thing and get good quality measures. Good quality here was every triangle has angles of 90, 45, and 45. Just cross it this way. Or you can decide about other triangulation, but as we said, we like triangles to be have all angles, large angles, fat triangles. Okay, we can decide, of course, about other splitting policy, like we'll split until every quadrant contains only one edge of the shape. If it contains two edges, for example, it's not right, this edge and this edge, then we'll split it. If we have a region that contains only one edge, perfect, leave it as is. Yet another policy. Not necessarily leading to good triangulation, but still is quite nice. We can always triangulate everything else. What was the issues that might cause with this triangulation? That we, I was trying to come up with a nice example. Let's decide that we are heating the area. We ask how heat dissipates over here, and we'll decide that we approximate the heat. Everything is made of metal, and we assume that triangle is small enough, so I'll decide that if along an edge of the triangle, I'll say all the points along the triangle all have the same temperature. Constant temperature along an edge. Constant temperature along an edge, constant temperature along an edge, and my equation will be simplified, and it's not a terrible simplification, so that if the degree of this edge is 80 degrees Fahrenheit, then the degree of this edge would be some function of time, but influenced by the 80 degrees. This is if we start when the degree of this guy is 50 degrees, and sometime after that, it will get to 55, 60, 70, but I still want the edge of this triangle to be approximately uniform, or approximately along the edge. Both assumptions are not accurate, but both are good enough to start getting some approximation. Having this degree with this assumption, I'm running into issues with the triangulation if I'll decide that once the degree of this guy, or the degree of this guy is 60, and here I have this enormous triangle, and just because tiny little piece of it has degree of 60 degrees, this whole much larger edge will eventually get close to 60 degrees, even though the source of the heat is so minuscule. Right. Okay. So this will be 0 degrees, this will be 0 degrees, this will be 0 degrees, but mysteriously, just because one tiny source of heat, it influences this enormous triangle. Doesn't make much sense. It will make more sense if the sides of the triangles will be roughly the same, and the side of this triangle will be not very different than the side of this triangle. So at least they have the same area, more or less. How did we solve it? Balanced quadrille. Not to confuse with compressed quadrille. Balanced quadrilles was, before we are actually getting to do the triangulation, we might decide to split some nodes. Why? Because I have this very big node, very big quadrant, but next to it there is a tiny little quadrant. We don't like it. We want that every quadrant, every neighbor of this quadrant will be of either the same size, or maybe half the size, or maybe twice the size. But 4 times the size, or 10 times the size, likely, this versus this are not acceptable and very easy to fix. How? I'll take this quadrant and split it. And then I'll take this quadrant and split it. And I'll keep splitting until the difference between every 2 squares that are neighboring is at most 2. And we had a proof that said that, sure, I need to introduce some more triangles by doing so, more quadrants before the triangulation. However, the complexity of the trees, the number of nodes after the splitting, is not more, is a constant times the number of nodes before the triangulation. So if you were willing to live with this tree before the triangulation, then there is very little overhead of moving to this balanced triangulation. And then some approximation, some odd cases like this will not happen. That is, my heating process would be this guy. If this star, if there is a heat source over here, it will slowly heat a triangle which is partially proportional to its size, which slowly dissipates into larger and larger squares. So that was about quadries and the relationship to triangulation or mesh generation, and about balanced quadries. We also were complaining about the issues with quadries, that sometimes we are getting very long paths just to separate two points that are very close to each other. We have 2 points that are very close to each other, so close that the guys that are sitting in the back don't see there are two of them. However, when I start to split them, I need to generate these very, very tall trees. How did we solve it? We just compressed the quadrille. We said if I have a shred with a node that has only one child, which in turn only has one child, which in turn only has one child, and maybe this guy finally have 2 or more children in the quadrille, could be at most 4, at least 2, then we'll call it a shred. We eliminate it. We need to store some more information at this node, but we don't need this whole node as a whole. Or we don't need, all these nodes that leads to it, as long as this node knows what's its region. And this way we have this lemma that I found very elegant, if you ask me, that said that after this compression, the number of nodes would be only linear in the number of input points. And you can use it, it doesn't have to be input points, but if you're storing input points and you have control on the number of leaves, well, you have m leaves altogether, then after the compression, the number of internal vertices of this tree will not be larger than the number of leaves. If the leaves are data points, and every leaf contains only one data point, then the number of leaves will be n, and the number of internal points would be at most n as well, maybe less. That was what we covered about R-trees, about quadries. So R-trees were built, we didn't spend much time about R-trees. We mentioned about R-trees that they consist of a hierarchy of bounding boxes. Take 2 segments, put a bounding box around them. Then take 2 pairs of bounding boxes, put a big bounding box around these 4. But as far as you know, it's only 2 bounding boxes, but I'm talking too much. 2 segments, put a bounding box around each of the segments. Now put a bounding box around the bounding boxes of each side separately, and put one neural node that summarizes all of it, etc. And sure, we can, it might be wasteful, it might be useful. It's very, very commonly used. It can tolerate many types of data. It can tolerate data that is changing in various ways, inserting elements, deleting elements, elements are moving. It's still very practical. It we can decide that we are not encapsulating only 2 segments, but we're encapsulating 100 segments or 100 bounding boxes at each level of the hierarchy, and then it fits very well paging processes or moving from the main memory to secondary memory, big chunks of contiguous memory, like moving a bucket of memory from one place to another. But remember that in this way we said, we started to look at what happens if it's stored on a hard drive, on a disk, and how many IOs operation do I need to perform. Right. We said if every node has 1,000 children rather than 2, then sure, the CPU needs to work harder, but CPU are fast. However, the number of IOs that I need to do when I'm searching something in the tree is down from 30 into 2 or 3. So that was definitely worth it for a data set of 1,000 elements. That was about R trees. Not too much, of course. In all trees, we discussed how to do reporting. I'll give you a query region, who lives in my query region, who intersect my query region, how many data points are there in my query region. KD trees, we ended last meeting, was we have a set of points. Again, doesn't have to be points, but a way to get, at least to present the idea. We have a set of points, cut them so that you have n-half many points on each side. And the cut is vertical. Move to the next direction. This was orthogonal to the x-axis. Now I'm cutting them where I'm orthogonal to the y-axis. How I take this n-half many points, divide into n over 4 and n over 4. And the same for the y side, n over 4 and n over 4. And now I'm moving to the next direction. Dimension, if I have, parallel to the orthogonal to the z-axis, if I have. I don't have it here, so I'm back to the x-axis. So my next cut would be by picking segments that are orthogonal once again to the x-axis. So now it would be splitting into n over 8 and n over 8 at each point. How? By always picking the median either by x or by y. What did we see interesting about these KD trees? The height is always logarithmic. The height is always logarithmic because I always splitting by 2. And it splits the number of input points, not the size of my data. So doing point location, we didn't go over the details, but I think it's quite obvious. I'll give you a query point where my finger is. I'll ask you, is my finger landed on one of the data points or not? How can you answer it? You go to the root of the tree, asking is my finger is inside the region that the root of the tree covers? If yes, then is it to the left of the root or to the right of the root? To the left of the line that the root stores, or to the right of the values that the root stores? It's to the right, so you go to the right subtree, and now you go to the right subtree, to the root of the right subtree. So far, we go from the root that stores some value x1, go to my finger that calls y1, which is the value over here, above or below. In this case, it was above, go to the right, and keep on iterating in this tree until you'll find out the leaf that contains my finger. And then you'll ask, hey, this leaf must contain the point, as opposed to the quad tree. We don't have empty leaf in this case. And is my finger landed on the single point that this leaf contains? So that was how do I do point location. We briefly talked about reporting. Get the query region. Who are the points that live inside the query region? How many points are in the query region? Both sides. Either any points inside data points, inside my query region and so on, the standard reporting that we discussed all over the place. And we saw one cool feature that the other trees did not have, which was that if I take a straight line and ask who are the leaves, how many leaves are there that are cut by this straight line, and we said this number is no more than square root n. No more than square root n leaves that a straight line means. So what? Why are we excited about it? Because if we have a query, but this query in different color, but this query is actually a rectangle, axis parallel rectangle, tries to be with 90 degrees, trying to be, then who should, when I'm doing the reporting, how many nodes do I need to actually visit? If I see a node whose region is fully inside my query rectangle, I don't need to further visit it if I just want to count elements. Just see how the root of this subtree knows how many elements there are, at least in some region, so I don't need to further visit this node. If a node has a query region that is fully outside the query, don't need to visit it either. When do I need to visit a node? Only if one of the edges of the rectangles crosses through this node. One of the edges of this rectangle crosses this node. So what? Let's ask how many nodes have the properties that a straight line generated by either the top or the bottom edges of the query region, or by the left and by the right and left edges of the query region. How many of them do I visit? And the answer was square root n. Why? Because in the KD tree, we need to go 2 levels in the tree to double the number of nodes that we are visiting by 2. Again, usually in the binary trees, if I'm going down from the root 1 level, how many nodes do I visit? I had 1 node at the root, 2 nodes in their children, 4 nodes at the grandchildren. Every level that I go down, the number of nodes is doubling. In the KD tree, when we said at every straight line, cross either these 2 nodes, or these 2 nodes, or these 2 nodes, we have to see, but all discussed in the previous lecture, I only visit 2 nodes out of the 4 that are defined by a node, its children, and its children, and its grandchildren, but not grandchildren. Out of this finding tree, only 2 nodes, not sure which, but only 2 nodes will be visited. That is, to move from 1 node into 2 nodes, I have to go down 2 levels. Not 1 level like in binary. So what? So how many nodes do I need to visit, given that the height of the tree is age is exactly log 2 of n, floor ceiling, of course, that I know. Age is exactly log 2 of n, and now I start from the root 1, go to levels 2, go to levels 4, 8, 16, but I only double by 2 every second jump. So it's, the total number will be 2 to the age divided by 2, giving us our square root n. That was how I explained to myself where the square root n is coming from. That was a bit more involved, more clever. And that was about KD trees. Now, there are other types of range trees, but essentially they are more interesting theoretically. They are a bit less practical because if you have a very large data set, KD tree with its square root n is roughly as good as you can do. And as practically as you can do, because if you want to have a query that is better than square root n, you want a query time that is better than square root n, then you cannot store the data. It's important enough that it was being written. So it's all in theoretical sense. In practice, KD trees, quad trees, R trees are doing great in practice because data is not mean and generated usually by some vicious adversary to make your query go slower. So that explains the popularity. But what if we want to know how many points are in the query rectangle, and how many points are in the query rectangle? The numbers or the names explicitly, but I want that the query time is performing in small o squared in time significantly better than squared. For example, in log squared. We'll see how to perform it in log squared, this type of query. Better than square root, definitely. But then the memory that you need to allocate before the query comes, you cannot just get away with just linear memory. You cannot just store the data plus some extra factor with every data item. You need to suddenly go to n log n. Is this acceptable or not? Up to you, but if you're thinking about many terabytes of data, then suddenly there's extra factor of the log n in the memory. You need to, instead of buying many terabytes of disk, you need to get n times log n. It makes it very interesting theoretically, less interesting in terms of practical usage. But it's still extremely cool data structure, and we'll cover it. I want to move to different topic, which is motion planning. How do I find for a robot a path from one point to another? We'll start from a point robot and go further and go further and go further into more complicated robots, and we'll also discuss robots with many degrees of freedom, how at least we start to address it, use some of the tools. But before it, I need a little tool that is called a vertical decomposition. It has a word that I challenge you to pronounce, 30 times 0, trapezoidation, which is also vertical decomposition into trapezoids. So we had triangulation, now we have a trapezoidation of segments. The harder part in this whole algorithm is to pronounce it properly. By the way, I think that the grades of homework 2 were a bit low, so I might curve them a bit. And Amir is saying that he's halfway in homework 3. But at least, I think that I'm trying to get it. If you are still think that you don't understand or that you're not sure, I'm getting paid to have my office hours sold out. Amir can visit us more frequently. That's why I'm going with this. Okay. So here I have a set of segments. I'll move to the slides pretty soon, but let me wait what I'm going to do. So, trapezoidation, family related to triangulation. Triangulation, I'm taking the plane, and I divide it into triangles so that every triangle is simple, in a sense. Has similar information associated with this. In particular, there are no points. I'll read everything. So, trapezoidation. I want to, my input is a set of segments, like so. And I want to partition this plane. Here is a bit of really puzzling text. What I'm actually trying to get will be clear once I show the algorithm. So what I'm trying to get is to partition the plane into regions such that every region is uniform and simple. Inside the region, everything is uniform and simple. In what sense? In each region, let's call it Rj, the segment from this set of segments, the segment that I see as a roof to this region, it must be the same segment for the whole region. The roof of the region is just one segment, one of them. I cannot change a segment at the middle of the region. So inside the region, the segment, the segment above the region is the same segment, just one unique segment, and so is the segment which is below the region, the ceiling. I'm looking at the ceiling, it must be the same segment as I'm walking inside the region. How do I am going to do it? I'm going to pick each and every vertex and shoot a ray downward and a ray upward. But my ray will stop the moment that I hit another segment. So I'll pick one of the vertices. I'm looking at all the vertices of the segment. I'll shoot a ray from this guy. All the way down, a ray all the way up. Pick this vertex, shoot a ray, but notice my ray hit S4 over here. So my ray doesn't continue. It stopped. It was blocked by the next. The first segment that I see, it blocks my way. And I shoot a way up that continues all the way to infinity. Do it again with the vertex of S1. Shoot a way down. My ray stops at S2. Cannot penetrate via another segment. This vertex, the endpoint of S2, a ray up, and a ray down. Block it once you hit it. Once you hit one of the other segments, you block it. You don't keep penetrating. And this vertex goes like this. And I'm done. Now, what is my region? In general, let's draw one of these regions. Intentionally not drawing the segment itself, just follow the boundary. So, what do I get here? This is a trapezoidal. Let's give it a name, tau. Oh, R. Let's just say one name. This is one of the trapezoids. Rj. What is the left wall? It's one of the rays that I shoot. It's vertical. What is the right wall? It's also one of the rays. Both vertical, so they are parallel to each other. What makes the roof of Rj? It's the segment S2. And the segment S2 does not end inside this region, because if I had another segment or another endpoint inside Rj, I would shoot a ray from this other vertex. So there is nothing inside this region, no endpoints or no endpoints and no other segment. It cannot be that there is some long segment that crosses Rj, because then I would make the rays coming from here ending at the stick, not getting all the way down to S4. In other words, what did they say? I'm not sure if in proper English, but what did they say about the flow of Rj? It consists of one of the segments. The same segment, S4 in this case. S4 is used for other trapezoids as well, but at least inside Rj, it's the same segment S4 that makes the S4 that makes the floor of Rj. What about the ceiling? It's all the way S2. Again, if there was anything else that I cannot switch the floor to another segment because then I would shoot a ray from this other segment. Why did I get trapezoidation? Why is every region is a trapezoid? Because the two walls are the same. Here is another such trapezoid, maybe a bit more interesting. Its floor is its ceiling consists of S1. Its floor consists of a part of S2. Its right wall consists of actually the two rays that I shoot up and down from this vertex. And its left wall is determined by another endpoint. Cool is everybody? Everybody understand why it's our trapezoid? Yes, sir.
I didn't understand what we're trying to do. You're saying we partition the plane to regions and then such that the region.
I mean, inside the same region, let's talk about Voronoi diagram. 2 points are in the same cell of the Voronoi diagram. If look at the nearest data points, it's the same data point. 2 points. What do I say here? Here are my cells, and if I'm in the cell and I'm looking up, 2 points in the same cell, in the same trapezoid, we'll see the same segment as a roof.
Oh, okay.
It was mentioning, for any 2 points, you see any 2 points in Rj. And 2 points, look down, if they are in the same trapezoid, they see the same segment as the bottom, they see the same segment at the top. You can call the minus infinity another segment or just say, okay, it's still a clear trapezoid, even though I didn't exactly specify what's the bottom because there is no segment below me. And the same goes here. You might occasionally create triangles, but triangles are just trapezoid. It might be that you have the right wall, but not fully the left wall. Just the right wall will just shrink to be a point. There are such cases, don't worry. Triangle is just an example of trapezoid, that you have one wall, but vertex as the other side of the wall. Still, you have these 2 segments, below and above. And can somebody please tell me how to generate, given the set of segments and such segment, please tell me how to generate the trapezoidal, the vertical decomposition fast.
You're doing a line sweep, keep track of the.
As simple as it. You're doing line sweep, as you're doing the line sweep, every point on your status knows who is the segment above me, who is the segment below me. QED. And you can tailor the DCL data structure if you want to have every trapezoid as a face. But yes, that's the answer. Just do a line sweep, every event, you don't have crossing event, because I told you, I don't have segments that cross each other. So the only events that I have are just right endpoint, left endpoint, starting and ending of a segment. And from every such endpoint, I just check who is the segment in my status. Segment just below me, the segment just above me. Successor and predecessor of this endpoint. That's it. And that's generated for you all the segment just above this endpoint, the beginning of S3, look above it in the status, so it's S1 above me, the successor in the status. Status, you remember, it's this balance search tree that keeps the segments that crosses the line sweep in the order that they appear along this line sweep. So every point can in log n look above, look below, see who are these segments above, immediately above and immediately below. And of course, this endpoint doesn't care who is above S3. Even if there are segments above S3, I don't care. The trapezoidal decomposition is just shooting away vertically up until the first segment that I hit. Okay, so the time to do all of it is, how much time do I need for the whole process building this trapezoidal decomposition? Not much room for negotiation, and log n because that's just the time of line sweep. People, Zoom people, make sense to everybody? Okay. Okay. Okay, took a bit more than I thought, but it's good. I'm happy that I worked together all the trees that I had so far. We'll have time to discuss exactly point robot, and the rest will wait for Tuesday. So, motion plane. There's a chapter about it that I follow quite closely, the chapter about in the 4M's book. And the input is a set of obstacles. I'll have the initial position of the robot. I'll have the final position of the robot. And the goal is to find a path, not necessarily the shortest path, just a path that will start at the initial step and at the final, and your robot cannot hit any of the obstacles. And of course, in general, this robot might have multiple arcs and links and joints and have multiple degrees of freedom. We'll start simple. So, but what we're doing is a payment of robotics all over the place. So, a few notation, workspace, everything, including the obstacles. The space, and you tell me what are the obstacles that my robot is supposed to not to hit. The configuration space, I have the robot. To know, I'll tell you where is the robot right now. I'll think about just 2 degrees of freedom. My robot can move, can translate, but cannot even rotate to start with. Okay, so I'll just look at the what is the where is the robot, and I'll start when the robot will just be a point. I'll warm up, doesn't have much mass, it's like a very, very tiny Roomba robot. I'll have the forbidden space, where my robot does hit one of the obstacles, and if I have the forbidden space, then where can the robot move? It will be the free space. Every translation of the robot that does not cause it to occlude one of the obstacles, and the configuration and the collision-free path from the beginning to the end. It should not move, the robot should move without hitting any of the obstacles. And once again, since it's a point robot, it can be essentially anywhere outside the obstacles. It will be a bit different when my robot will have a bit more failed to capture. So assume the robot is just a point, then the workspace is just a configuration space. It can move anywhere which is not occupied by obstacles. And I want to ask, is there a path or is there not a path? Sure, there is always a path. I need to find what is this path. And why am I sure that it's path? So my obstacles don't cross each other. My input will be with, I should have said it, my obstacles don't cross each other, so there is always a way to sneak between the obstacles, but just to pave the way for more interesting algorithms, what would I do? Here are my obstacles. I need to find a path for the robot. And this path might definitely wave between obstacles. So how can I generate it using what you know about graphs exploration? I want to make it into BFS or DFS or some problems that involve graphs. What should I do? Do vertical decomposition from every corner. Well, it's not a segment, it's obstacle. Big deal. Every vertex of an obstacle shoot away up, shoot away down, way up, way down. You stop your way the moment that you hit one of the other obstacles. So now the free space is divided into a set of trapezoids. N log n, n trapezoids to be precise. We didn't say it exactly, but if I can run the vertical decomposition in n log n, and there are only n events, then the number of trapezoids that I generate is n as well. I think it's kind of obvious that you cannot generate more than the number of vertices, trapezoids. So from every vertex, shoot away up, shoot away down. What do you do next? Look at two neighboring trapezoids, create an edge between them. If two trapezoids share an edge, they are neighboring. Put a vertex at the center of each trapezoid, and at each endpoint of each edge of the trapezoid, put a vertex as well. What the heck, we are still in order n many points, middle of trapezoids nearby, and then just you generate, and then two vertices to center of trapezoids are connected by an edge. If you can walk from one to another, which means there is no, because you did the vertical decomposition, it means there is nobody that separates, no obstacles that separates them, right? If there was an obstacle, these two trapezoids will not be neighboring each other. Neighboring would mean they share a wall. Maybe I should have said it. Neighboring is here or connected by an edge, meaning they share a wall which is generated by this vertical way. There is not a real obstacle that separates them. So my robot can move from one trapezoid to the next, to the next, to the next, kind of obvious way, until it reaches the destination. Now I generated a graph. I add to the graph the starting point, I add to the graph my endpoint, and do BFS, DFS, whatever you like to do in graphs to discuss if there is a path from one vertex to another. Does it require more explanation on this level of hand waving is fine. Right. And you understand, and you all see why did I want the vertical decomposition. It's not necessary, but it helps me because now in the vertical decomposition, I know that inside the trapezoid there is no obstacle to my left, no obstacle to my right, there are just walls. Oh, if there is an obstacle to my left, like here, it's the same obstacle. It's one single obstacle. I don't switch multiple obstacles in the same trapezoid over here because it's the same wall. It comes from the same obstacle. If there was another obstacle that I switch in the middle, another way that I would shoot. Yes, sir.
And when you create the trapezoidal path on this, you also shoot array from the start point and the test.
I can just say it is inside one of the trapezoids, so I can definitely move. Since I'm not care about the shortest path necessarily, for the shortest path I'll have to use something like visibility graph that asks who sees whom here. That's slightly different too. If I just care about a path, reasonable path, I'll just say inside the trapezoid I can definitely move to the center of the trapezoid because there is no obstacle. Every trapezoid is in the free space and it's always the same, one vertex above, one vertex below. You can move from one trapezoid to the next just by neighboring until you get all the way to here. That's as trivial as I'm describing it.
Why do we need vertices on each endpoint of the race? Again,
Imagine that trapezoid to this trapezoid. So one way will be moved to this trapezoid and go back, or move from this trapezoid to this vertex, and then move to the other trapezoid.
Right.
So it gives you, and since it's all order n, then it's, well, I mean, the same argument, just do the line strip. If I start with n, I don't care how many obstacles, if they all together have n many vertices altogether, then it's all order n and done in n log n. And to explore the graph itself, just because I cared of, remember Euler, or just cared about neighboring, the graph has only n, order n edges. So m of the graph, the number of edges, is just linear, n, 2, and 4. And so checking connectivity in this graph is trivial. The interesting part will be that all the same approach will work just with different shapes when my robot will start to actually contain some regions, and my robot cannot, even the center of the robot cannot get too close to one of the obstacles. So all these obstacles will start to be larger and larger as the robot starts to occupy more and more territory. And then more interesting stuff, but I'll still end by, here is the free space, do vertical decomposition of the new free space, all the possible translation of my big robot, so that it cannot hit anybody and then check connectivity. So that's like the first step, but it's all the algorithm for a point robot. Life will be more interesting if the shape is polygon. And of course, more interesting if it has more degrees of freedom than not only translation. You can also rotate or translate. Oh, you have time. I did the same mistake of confusing the 5:45 quarter to 6 versus 6:15. Okay, so hopefully this is clear. We have another 15 minutes. Sorry about it if there was, yeah. So let's continue. Non-point robot. But I'll assume that my robot is convex. It's not convex, I'll triangulate it or partition it into something. By the way, you see, both triangulation and trapezoidation are just ways to divide a partition complex scene into smaller and simpler regions that I can do elementary operation between these atoms of the region. Okay, so now my robot is a triangle, at least convex. How do I specify a location of this robot? This robot is going to move and going to get to some destination. The objects are static, the robot is going to move. How do I specify a translation of the robot? I'll pick a point at the robot and call it the origin of the robot. Where is this point in the robot? You don't care. Any point you do any point in the robot is fine. If you want not to pick it in the center of the robot, but pick it at the corner, what will mean is that the whole free space will be shifted a bit, but it's going to be the same free space. And what used to be a path for one origin will be the same path, just slightly shifted for another path. So you pick arbitrary, not random, arbitrary point in the robot, and that's the origin. And now, once you have the origin, then I can define, I'll say, the origin to start with when I start my traversal. The origin, the robot is stated, so this is the origin of the axis, but also the origin of the robot. I nailed it, so this point over here is exactly the center of something of the robot, and that's where it starts. So that is starting point. Any future location of the robot, how do I tell you where the robot is? I don't want to tell you where every vertex is. No, I don't need to. I just need to tell you where is the origin of the robot when I shifted it. So from now on, every shift of the robot will be specified by specifying a point where the origin of the robot is after the shift. Make sense? It's only two-dimensional once you decided about where the origin is. Then every future location is just where is the center? Where is the center of the robot? Okay, and continue. The C obstacle will be the set of robot position which overlap n obstacle, all the forbidden region. The forbidden region would be now not, but how do I tell you where the robot cannot be? I need to tell you what is forbidden region that cause the robot to intersect one of the obstacles. So the free space would be the bounding box or the box that somehow encloses everything, minus all the forbidden space. This sentence is a bit too complicated. Every place that the robot does not intersect any obstacle is legitimate. Every translation of the origin of the robot that makes the robot in a place where the robot doesn't intersect any of the translation, any of the obstacles. And giving a robot an obstacles, I need to tell you how can I calculate what are these forbidden regions. Well, that is, what is the boundary that separates the allowable world from the forbidden world? And just to see that we are still in business. Going back a few slides, 4-point robot. What is the forbidden region? 4-point robot. What is the forbidden region? Just to see, because we had too many definitions, so just to see. Just the boundary of the obstacle. The obstacles themselves, the center of the point, which is just a point itself, cannot be inside one of the obstacles. Yeah. So that everything outside the obstacle is a free space. For a non-point robot, it will be a bit more interesting. So, Minkowski sum, really cute. You have two shapes. One is called P, one is called Q. And a famous, I think, German mathematician called Minkowski had many contributions besides this one, but they decided to call this operation after Minkowski. So what is this Minkowski? Here is P. Here is Q, both polygons, and P, Minkowski sum. You will not find consensus if it should be I or Y. The Minkowski sum of P and Q is a set of all the points. Which point? I'll take P and I'll take 1 point from P. And so 1 point from P, call it small p, 1 point from Q, call it small q, and sum them up. P plus Q, and I'll do it for every point. P in P and Q in Q. So it's like a nested loop. For every point P in P, every point Q in Q, sum these points together. Okay, so that's a part that I think that it's starting using. So you sum up all these points and there's a set of all the points all together. You'll call them the Minkowski sum. Okay, here is P, here is Q. Can you please tell me what is the Minkowski sum of P, Minkowski sum of Q? Well, that was fast.
Yeah, it would be basically P extended on the left by the distance of Q, and
you guys are either very well prepared or very fast. So I need to say where is the origin, but where is the origin of the axis? Because I'm looking at a point like the vectors when I sum them, but it doesn't matter very much where I place the origin. Let's decide that the origin is right here, the origin of the axis, and that's also the corner of P, and here is Q, and what do? I take this point, which is 0, 0, and place it right here. And that will create this point. I'm going to show you what is P plus Q. And I'm taking this point, which is, say, 0, 1, and I sum it up with this point, so this plus this, remember vector summation. This point, think about it as a vector, plus this vector, bring me to here. This point plus 1. So it means that, and actually as I'm checking all these points of P, I'm generating all the points over here. That's to start with this segment Q. Remember Q was just a segment. And now, how do I generate all the points P plus Q? In GeoGebra, I can generate it by just starting traces. I'm moving P along it and like putting ink on its bottom. I'm putting ink on the bottom of the robot and move it from left to right along this segment, generating something that looks like this. The dimensions are not accurate, but at least this gives you the idea. Let's do another example. P is the disk, here is the origin. Q is a segment, Minkowski sum. Somebody else?
I guess an oval. Like, yeah, it's an oval.
Formally, it's not, but close.
Like a circle is candidate along here.
I take the center of the circle, putting it here. That would be generating one point. That is, take this point of Q plus the center of P, and now add every other point of P, and you generate this circle. So this is part of the Minkowski sum, this disk. So this disk is part of the Minkowski sum, if this is a disk. Then I'll do the same thing with the other endpoint of the segment, generating this other disk. And the word that we were looking for is a hypodrome, where horses used to race in, at least in Rome, I don't think, I'm not sure about nowadays. And now as I shift the disk along this segment, and again putting ink around it, I'm generating, it's basically a rectangle. A rectangle, it's not, doesn't look like it, but a rectangle plus a semicircle over here and a semicircle over here. Cool, people start to understand what is the Minkowski sum? Minkowski sum of these two shapes. I generate it, shift it, and rotate. And remember not acceleration are allowed. So I put ink around all of it, and of course I move it on, not only along the boundaries, but altogether it covers everything. So once again, this animation, just do this shifting a bit more slowly and everything over here. Yeah.
Would you get the same shape if you moved the green?
Fantastic. I would get the same shape, just a bit translated. Why? Because it doesn't curve. It's P plus Q plus P. Good point. Everybody understand? P plus Q is just like Q plus P. The order doesn't matter. And you notice a few other parts. At least in this example, this is convex, this is convex, and so is this. How many edges does it have? Or how do I generate the edges? Well, every edge that I generated is either parallel to an edge of P, or like this edge and this edge. How did I generate these edges? Let's go back. The diagonal edges. So here I generated the left edge of this creature. And once I didn't move the robot, but when the robot was here at the top part, where it is right now, over here, it generated this diagonal edge. So this edge is parallel to an edge of the blue guy, and other edges are parallel to edges of the green guy, and some are parallel to both because it's not general position. Yeah.
So the parameter of the final edge would be the same as the perimeter of the two edges added together. In this case, it's true, but is that a
Great question. Playing with Minkowski sums and periodic DNA, I don't know. Never thought about it. It's true for square, for... It could be. I mean, never thought about it. Yeah.
But, I mean, in the case of like this, it is true, but I was just wondering if that was a general.
Great question, and I don't know. It's cute. Just to make sure, but because of your question, if P is disk and Q is a disk, that's another example where your assumption is correct, P and Q is a disk. The Minkowski sum is a disk whose radius is the radius of this guy plus the radius of this guy. You can do your algorithm in either case. Right, you'll take P and put it here, and then you take the center of Q and move it around. Or do it the other way around, so take the center, take Q, put it here, and then move the center of P on its boundary, and obviously you're getting the same thing. Now, if P and Q are polygons, and they are both convex, then the Minkowski sum will be a polygon, and the number of edges, is just the sum, or at most the number of edges of P, plus the number of edges of Q. Because every edge is parallel to either this one or this one. And we'll argue it a bit more. Why is this true? If P is convex and Q is convex, then the Minkowski sum is convex. That will be really useful for the motion planning problem. Okay. And every edge of P plus R is parallel to either an edge of P or an edge of R. Here are 4 robots. And how do I generate this? I want to claim that if P has m edges and R has n edges, then the Minkowski sum has at most just the number of edges in each one of them. It might be actually tight bound, I don't remember. Might be that it's, at least it's not more than this, and we'll prove it, because it will help us also build an algorithm for actually doing it. And the idea would be, I'll show you from time to time some circles of all directions. Let's decide that the direction is specified by looking at a unit vector from some distance. And in this direction, I will take a line that is orthogonal to this direction and move it all the way to the edge. And look at lines at this part. And now when you know what is the direction, I can speak about extreme points. What is the extreme point? In this direction? Or what is the extreme point? This direction, this one, it's just the rightmost point. I'm taking a vertical line, I'm just asking what is the rightmost point. That's the extreme point to the right, the extreme point down, left, right, left, up, but any other direction I can just specify the extreme point in the same way. And now it gives us some hint about how to create a Minkowski sum. Every point of the Minkowski sum of the two polygons will be the extreme point of the first polygon plus the extreme point of the other polygon of the robot. The rightmost point is created by, the rightmost point of the sum is created by the rightmost point of P plus the rightmost point of Q. And this starts to give us some hint about the overall complexity. Let's talk about the convexity. Assume that P and R are convex and have n plus edges, then P Minkowski sum of R is convex, and the proof is just following directly what is convex, which means that every 2 points in them look at the segment between them. The segment between them must be the Minkowski sum because you can generate. You have two points that are both in the Minkowski sum of these two shapes, then look at every point that is, say, the middle of the way between T1 and T2. How do you generate this point in the middle? Take the middle point of the corresponding segments. Okay, let's go for it. It's kind of obvious. Take the middle point. It's generated by the middle points of the two original shapes, and the middle point of the original shape is inside the shape because we said that both polygons are convex. I don't know the slide, so let's talk a bit about more classification of what is P plus. No, we have actually slide. Here is my robot. I want to show you minus R. I take every point in the robot and look at the xy when you point in the robot, and look at minus x minus R. It is reflected by both axes. Okay, that's just minus of the robot. Everybody understand? Take xy, move it to minus x minus y for every point inside the robot. Okay. Here's a really cool theorem. I think about one obstacle, P, one particular obstacle. And I think about my robot, this triangle over here, and I'm asking which triangle, which translation will cause the robot to intersect with the obstacle. Of course, I need to allocate one specific point in the obstacle, in the robot, to say that's the origin. But we said that this point is completely arbitrary. Let's take the right point, lower right point, to be that's the origin. So now here is some translation that I moved the origin. And because I moved it by this translation, there is some point Q that lies in the translated robot, but also inside the obstacle. And I want to ask, what are all the translations that are forbidden? Because some point of the robot to be inside some point of the obstacle. These are forbidden. So, here's the answer. The translations that are not allowed can be generated as a Minkowski sum of the obstacle, P, Minkowski sum of not a robot, takes the robot and reflect it, minus of the robot. And that will be all the translations that are not allowed. Let's prove it. It's very, very easy. So, assuming that the robot R, capital R, translated by moving its corner by some translation key, now has some collision with the obstacle P. So I have some point Q that lies in the obstacle. There is some point, maybe more than one, there is lots of points here, but there is at least one of them, which is some point Q, which belongs to the obstacle, but it also belongs to the robot plus R. T plus R, it's Minkowski sum or not Minkowski sum, is just a robot translated by R. That is, this point Q, at least one of them, equals to the translation as a vector, plus one particular point R of the robot. Small r is one of the points of the robot that after the translation lies inside the obstacle. So I want to ask, where is T? Where is this translation T? So Q equals T plus R, then T equals Q minus R. Yeah. If the translation T is plus some point of the robot equals to some point of the obstacle, then T equals to this point Q of the obstacle, minus are some point, I don't know which exactly, but some point of the robot, the original robot, before the translation. That is, key must be in the following set. It must be in the set of all the points q prime plus minus r prime, where, sorry, these are tags, where q prime and r prime are 2 points, one inside p prime and one inside p, and r is inside the robot. All good? But it's q, notice, plus minus r. So t belongs to p Minkowski sum with minus r. So to compute what is the forbidden region, I need to take this triangle, flip it this way, shift it around. That's all the translations that are forbidden. Everything outside this region is allowed. People, are you all agree? There is no smartnesses here. It's just to write what is Minkowski sum and just to say, if there is some point q which belongs to t the robot plus r, then the translation t must belong to the following set. Take all the points in the obstacles, take all the points in the robot, and take the point in the obstacle minus the point in the robot, which is just exactly the definition of the Minkowski sum. And of course, the same point t might be generated multiple times in this double loop. Okay. Yeah, it's time. Thank you. Questions? Nothing? Okay.